Welcome to the Imperial Newsstand. I'm Alan Imperial. On today's show, I'm going to be talking about, once again, the $2 trillion coronavirus stimulus package. I wanted to wait until the package actually got voted through, but it looks like we'll have to wait a few more hours at the very least. So, CBS News, I think, has the most concise way of putting the stimulus package. I went through a lot of different places, and this has the easiest to read. Off the top, of course, Americans are going to get up to $1,200 and possibly 2,400 if you're a couple, and more if you have children. There is a range of how much money you're getting, and it looks like if you're not making $75,000 a year, you're going to be getting less than $1,200. At least that's the way I read it here. Something great that they're doing is expanding unemployment insurance by making the benefits more per week and extending the time people can be on unemployment. Both two good things during this pandemic. Again, really loving the small business loans that are going out. Love the fact that they're giving money to the state and local governments. Of course, we need money for the hospitals, but the $500 billion that is that are here for loans, I'm not for. And I'm going to talk about why I'm not for that in a little bit. Now, they say places that can't get the loans are things like, or that can't get the money and or the loans are places like Trump-owned businesses, either by President Trump himself or his family. A good thing. Nepotism's bad. And they say money can't go to Trump's border wall. Fair. Let's keep the money in America, not on its borders. But if you look around, this is the New York Post. They go into a little more detail saying how billions of dollars are going to go into the New York transit system. About 4 billion. What is it? 3.8 to be exact for the MTA here in New York, and that's a good thing. And again, people talk about the $500 billion business loan, and that's a lot of money. But that's not the only money.
The total package here comes to roughly $6 trillion, 2 trillion direct assistance, roughly 4 trillion in Federal Reserve lending power. Again, it will be the largest Main Street financial package in the history of the United States. Liquidity and cash for families, small business, individuals, unemployed to keep this thing going. We're heading for a rough period, but it's only going to be weeks, we think. Weeks and months, not going to be years, that's for sure.
This is a rough patch for weeks or months. And if you couldn't hear, Kudlow here says it's going to cost up to $6 trillion. And it's funny because we've been talking about 2.2 trillion for the coronavirus stimulus package. These numbers add up to about 1.1 trillion, and the other 1.1 trillion comes, I'm assuming, from these two guys. But why is Kudlow talking about $6 trillion worth of stimulus? Well, what he's talking about is $4 trillion coming from the lending power for the Federal Reserve. Now, this is why I think having this this loan right here and the oversight board are redundant and not needed. And that's because We're already planning on having $4 trillion in loans already. This 500 trillion, excuse me, 500 billion is is a fraction of the amount that they're actually planning on giving. And I don't know why they're putting it here as well as here. It it doesn't make sense to me. I understand we need to have emergency loan programs out there right now. That makes sense. What I don't get is why they're having it in two places, the $2 trillion in aid and the $4 trillion in aid. I don't know why they're doing that because the American people are getting what up to $3,000 if they have children, or $1,200 if you're in this magical range of 75 to 99,000. Maybe you get $1,000 if you're making 50,000 or something. I have no idea what the scale is, but you're telling me even in the bill meant to help Americans, you're gonna help billion-dollar corporations twice. Now, to get deeper in the numbers, because everybody loves numbers, hooray! This is from PBS.org, and they reported a few days ago the Federal Reserve to lend an additional 1 trillion a day to large banks. The numbers get astronomically large fast. Basically, to keep it simple, the Federal Reserve is the bank for the banks, and they are saying they're going to have $1 trillion a day that you could take out for 24-hour loans, and this is at 0% interest. So it's basically free money. Uh, this money doesn't come from anywhere. It's basically taken from the value of the dollar, and they just make it out of thin air. And then this money is paid back within 24 hours. So it's $14 trillion that they're willing to loan out up until the end of March. On top of that, they have $1 trillion loan for 14 days. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I was reading that banks were taking up about 10 to $15 million. So a tiny fraction of what the actual Federal Reserve is actually loaning out, which is a good thing. That means banks are healthy, uh, and if banks are healthy, that means money could flow. If money could flow, we're not going to have a grind to the economy like we did 12 years ago, 11 years ago. And that's why we have all these loans happening, on top of Americans getting $1,200. But let's do the math here. Half a trillion, 4 trillion. That's 4.5 trillion plus 1 trillion. We're at 5.5 trillion plus 14 trillion. That's 19.5 trillion dollars that we are giving out in loans. That the federal government or the Federal Reserve, because they're not technically the federal government, they're giving out almost $20 trillion in loans. That's not including the loans that have already been given out because this has been going on. The pumping of liquidity into the markets since I believe November, and they're saying that we already bought about $75 billion in treasuries and $47 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities in one day, and that was last week. On top of the 280 billion in treasuries that we've already purchased since November. So it's another $500 billion that the government has is planning on using uh, for this other $20 trillion is such a large number. Ugh. Now I know why they're doing it. They're doing it because the government is afraid of having a financial collapse and having another type of crisis, and I applaud them for for uh, for trying to stave that off. But if we're giving $20 trillion to companies, $20 trillion to companies, I don't think having $1,200 for individuals is really going to cut it. Expanding unemployment, fantastic. All for that. But if you're planning on having this last for months, months as Kudlow said, I don't know if these two things combined is gonna get us through this. Uh, I don't know. I think it's disproportionate that they're helping out companies in the tune of up to $20 trillion from what is being reported by different places. It hurts. It hurts that we're pumping all this money into the economy. Thankfully, right now we're not in the uh, in the in the area of worrying about inflation just because of the way that inflation works. But I don't know. We're getting to a point that is getting to scary big numbers, and hopefully the economy could handle this. All right. I'm Alan Imperial, and I'm signing out.